What's up, y'all? Welcome to the 30K Q&A. So this Q&A is going to be a little bit different. Previous Q&As, I answered every single question. Literally every single question, hundreds of questions per video, and understandably, they ended up being an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours long. This is just way too long for a Q&A, and honestly, it just destroys me mentally for like 2, 3, 4 days afterwards. So to make things more manageable, I thought I would answer the 20 most requested and most upvoted questions. So let's get right into it. The most requested question, I'll start from most to least, 49 likes / upvotes, whatever's. How do you personally get over a bad day? Now I won't read the full question. I'll put on the screen so you can read it if you want to. But basically, this is one thing that I've sort of changed my opinion on over time. I used to take a more relaxed and casual approach, thinking, bad days always happen. Like there's sometimes bad days just happen for no reason, just keep going and, don't get too caught up in it. But now I sort of analyze why exactly it happened. Because there's always a reason, right? Somewhere in your plan, somewhere in your lifestyle, in your diet, in your sleep, somewhere, there is a reason why you didn't feel as strong or you didn't feel as good. And I think you can learn a lot from your bad days. If you just brush it off and you're like, bad days happen, you're really missing an opportunity to learn something good. You can learn just as much, if not more, from a bad day, a bad workout, as a good day or workout. First, I think it's important to keep things in perspective, especially if you're a beginner and you're turning into an intermediate. You have to realize, you're not going to be able to hit a personal best every single workout like you used to do. Progression does slow, and you need to keep that in mind and take that into account. And it's important to give yourself the flexibility in your program to where you're not just hitting certain specific numbers. Some powerlifters are a big fan of plotting out a 10-week training cycle. Every set, every rep, every exercise, every RPE, everything laid out in stone. But in reality, you're going to see some fluctuations. It's just you have really good days, you have average days, and you do have bad days. And third, you want to find out why you had that bad day. Did you have enough sleep? Was the sleep quality good? Did you eat enough? Did you eat too close to the workout, too far away from the workout? Are your calories sufficient? If you're cutting, you'll probably see more variability in if you have good or bad days. Recovery from the previous workout is probably going to be the biggest one. If you did a bunch of deadlifts on Monday, coming in Wednesday and expecting to hit, personal bests on the squat, it might not be that realistic. Finally, don't feel discouraged. They happen for a reason, but you can't just get, all frustrated and emotional because you do have to take it in stride. You should analyze why it happened, but you also shouldn't get too worked up about it. All right, question number 2 from the one and only FitLab. Check him out on YouTube. Really, really underrated, very high quality content. Are you thinking about doing any content collaborations with any other channels in the future? Which channels would you like to collab with if you did, and on what topics? So it's sort of a 3-parter. Are you thinking about doing any content collaborations? It's not something that I really plan, and due to living in China, I've lived here for 10 years, it makes collaborations a little bit difficult. The time difference is the biggest one. I have like a little gap in the evening or in the morning, except I don't function in the morning, so it would be like the evening for me and the morning for them, and that makes things a little bit tricky. Plus, I have to use a VPN to access pretty much any Western social media, and this can make, like video chats and stuff sort of a pain in the ass. Sometimes they cut out, sometimes, the connection is not great. And, I have done, I was on Dave McConey's Brains and Gains podcast a couple of times, SSD Able as well. And I really want to do more in the future, but sometimes the logistics are a little bit tricky. Which channels? Pretty much anyone who, I'm a fan of. I have my 10 favorite YouTubers up here. I'd love to collab with any of them. And for what topics, or anyone else, by the way, it's not just those 10. And on what topics, pretty much anything to do with lifting or diet or nutrition. It wouldn't be something super off topic, like, hey, a political podcast. No, not really my thing. So basically anything related to things that people would actually be interested in on this channel. Question number 3 with 34 likes. Why do you say that it is not as necessary for naturals to feel the target muscles as it is for enhanced people? Why the difference? All right, so some people say there's no difference between training a natural and training an enhanced lifter. Just look around, dude. Just look around at what the top naturals are doing and then what the top enhanced lifters are doing. That being said, I think the mind-muscle connection is something that can help most people. And I also think progressive overload can help most people, even if you are enhanced. So it's not as black and white. It's not like naturals should train like this and enhanced lifters should train way, way differently. No, okay, there's still a lot of overlap. However, anecdotally, just looking around, you don't really see very many well-developed natural lifters, true lifetime natural lifters, not like the natural crowd, who train in this sort of very, very pump-focused mind-muscle connection manner, using light weights, actual lightweight baby kind of stuff. It just doesn't really happen. And you do see a fair amount of unnatural enhanced lifters who do. Now, in terms of physiology, maybe there's an enzymatic response when you take steroids. Certainly it allows for more leeway. You can do very little volume and still see very robust gains. You can do a ton of volume and still see very robust gains. So, I think there is something to that. Perhaps there's a joint integrity issue as well. If you're natural, your soft tissues, your ligaments, your tendons, they grow slowly, but your muscles also grow slowly. And so, they grow together and you have, fewer issues with strength-focused training, the 4 to 6 or so rep range. But if you're enhanced, well, your muscles grow extremely quickly because you're enhanced, and your joints and tendons might not catch up. And so I think that disparity leads to more of a pump-focused style of training. You basically just pump the hell out of the muscles and let the drugs do most of the work, because it doesn't really make sense to do lower reps because there's more of an inherent risk. Plus, some compounds definitely do impact joint structures in and of themselves. Number 4, are there any direct muscle building benefits to eating macronutrients other than protein? So carbohydrates, fats, and I guess alcohol is a macronutrient as well, technically speaking. That last one, no. But carbs and fats, yes, absolutely. If you go on a pure protein diet, you're not going to see very good growth, very good gains. It's just not going to happen. Your body can't just take protein and create muscle from nothing. It does need energy. And some of this energy can come from body fat, but probably not all of it. Okay, if you're on, an 800 calorie per day diet and it's just 200 grams of protein and literally nothing else, well, first of all, that's absolutely terrible for your health. Not necessarily because of the lack of carbs, but because of the lack of fat. And eventually, you will die. Yes, you will die. Your body needs fat to survive. The membranes of all your cells, guess what they're made out of? Fat. And I'm not saying you have to be in a massive caloric surplus to gain muscle, but you can't be in a huge, huge caloric deficit, which a protein-only diet or a protein-spared modified fast would be. And so carbs can be very helpful, okay? They do fill up your glycogen. They do release insulin. They do give you a feeling of energy in most cases. Now, can you gain muscle on a low-carb diet? Yes, absolutely. Can you gain muscle on a low-carb, low-fat diet? Probably not, especially if you're natural. I mean, your testosterone levels are going to be in the shitter. You're going to just feel like you're in the shitter, and not a good idea. And this will definitely impact your muscle growth, especially in the long term. In the short term, it's still going to impact your growth, but not as much as in the long term. And so it's not just, hey, fiber helps fill you up. There's a lot of biochemical stuff that is happening behind the scenes. All right, next question. If you wasted your newbie gains with inconsistency, poor nutrition, etc., are they still attainable? If so, are they age dependent? So age is not nearly as much of a factor as people think. A lot of people say, oh, I'm 40 years old, I'll never build muscle. Bullshit, okay? 70, 80-year-olds can definitely build muscle. And so if you're 30 or 40, you didn't waste very much, if anything at all. I started when I was 25. So it's not like you really have to do this very, very early in order to get some pretty decent results. Anyway, if you're still very far from your genetic muscular potential, whatever that is, it's not like you attain it ever, but it's there somewhere. If you're very far away from that, if you don't have very much muscle, you're still good to go, and you should still be able to make good progress if you get your shit together. All right, next one with 31 likes. If you're either really unmotivated or short on time, is it better to give a workout 60 to 70% effort or skip that day and give 100% effort the next day? Your head's not in the right place, okay? If you're short on time, the gym's going to close in 10 minutes and you can only get in an extremely short workout, fair enough, push it back if that's what your split allows, and it probably should. If you're really unmotivated, why are you unmotivated? You had a long day at work? Who gives a shit? Okay, that's nothing to do with training. It should not impact anything at all. And this is a very weak-minded mentality. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but that's just what it is, okay? Learn to function without motivation. There are plenty of times when I'm not particularly motivated to step foot in the gym. So, willpower, discipline, dedication, there are habits, there are a lot of things that you don't need to rely on motivation to actually get things going. So I would say you should still go in most cases, even if it's not optimal, because life is not optimal and you clearly need to learn the skill of grit. All right, next one, how much isolation volume do we need, really? Well, anywhere from none to a fair amount. A lot of people can get away with literally no isolation work at all, doing only compound movements, especially if you're a beginner, especially if you don't really have that high of goals, especially if you don't have any specific area that you want to target. If you're just a beginner and I want to build muscle, like which muscles? All the muscles. I would say mostly compound movements is going to be the right way to go. The more advanced you are and the more weak points start to show up, that's where isolation exercises can bring a lot of value. If you're the kind of person who just has lagging arms, not something I can relate to, but if you have lagging arms, perhaps pull-ups and bench press and dips aren't really going to be great for you. You're more torso dominant, and therefore isolation exercises can be a significant part of your program. Not necessarily the majority, I would say, but a significant part. How much? 30% of the sets, 40% of the sets, probably not more than 50% though. And I would say, generally speaking, the upper body responds better to isolation stuff. If someone wants bigger quads, leg extensions is not the first thing I say. If someone wants bigger hamstrings, hamstring curls. Again, not really the first thing I say. I would say for lower body, compound movements are absolutely king in almost every single circumstance, with the exception of maybe calves. Next question, 24 likes, sort of a two-parter. Are oblique exercises necessary or are compounds good enough? If you want oblique development, I would say, yeah, you're going to want to target them. You can get a bit of oblique activation, from squatting and deadlifting. That pressurizing effect does work the core. And, perhaps something like a one-arm row, a one-arm bench press, which I don't even recommend really, can get you some oblique activation and development, but it's not going to be nearly as effective as, something like a side bend or a cable side bend or rotation type of movements. So I would say if you want bigger obliques, if that's the look that you want, yeah, you're going to want to target them specifically. And number two, are there any ways teenagers should train differently or diet differently compared to adults? Frequency, intensity, etc. No, but if I had a teenager client, and I have had a few, I would be less likely to put them in a caloric deficit just because it might impact height, and it's probably not as necessary anyway, because especially if you're going through puberty, you can recomp so damn hard. Puberty can hit you so damn hard that it's just not necessary to even be in a deficit in the first place. So I would say, unless you're very, very high in body fat, you're more than 30%, you can probably just eat around maintenance and just literally grow through your physique and just recomp and just do that. It's probably easier and you're not going to be sacrificing, nutrition or your height or anything else like that. All right, next one. Your thoughts on artificial sweeteners. Also, your thoughts on the anabolic diet pushed forward by the likes of Greg Doucette, Remington James, exercise for cheat meals, etc. Well, artificial sweeteners are very researched, and most of the hesitancy towards them comes from rodent studies, where they gave them like the equivalent of thousands of Diet Cokes worth of aspartame or whatever, and they were like, hey, look, we see a correlation with cancer. Well, a little bit unrealistic. As for the second part, the anabolic diet, I think Remington James in particular is very pushy with this. You see, I went to his page once, and it was like every single video, I think it was him, every single video is all caps, anabolic, anabolic, anabolic. The thing is, low calorie density foods, high in fiber with all the fat removed, low in carbs, high protein, that's not anabolic. If anything, that's catabolic. This diet is pretty good for weight loss. I see a lot of people who, they did the Greg Doucette diet and they got really, really good results in terms of fat loss. That's not anabolic. That's catabolic. That is, anabolic is building up, catabolic is breaking down. If anything, it should be called the catabolic diet, but that's a lot harder to market. Is the anabolic diet going to be great for building muscle? Well, it depends. If you get really full from these recipes because of all the fiber and just bulk, no, it's not anabolic, because you need to be getting in more calories, getting into at least a slight caloric surplus, especially if you're already lean, especially if you are natural. So I would say it's fine, but realize what it's fine for. Also realize that a lot of these recipes are extremely simplistic to the point where I would not recommend anyone ever paying money for them, let alone hundreds of dollars. So, if you want to buy his product to support him as a content creator, completely fine. In my original video on his stuff, I say, I bought it to support him because I like a lot of his stuff. If that's the case with you, feel free to get it. But in and of itself, probably not worth the purchase price. If I won't be able to work out for say 2 to 3 months, what should be the strategy with respect to my diet to minimize muscle loss and fat gain? So you want pretty decent protein. This is where the anabolic diet might actually be a decent go-to, because your calories are going to be down because you're not working out, and yet you want to have pretty decent protein. You want to feel satiated. You definitely don't want to overeat. Exercise tends to regulate appetite quite well, and so I would say that's a decent strategy if you're not working out, because you need something to actually fill you up. Now, why can't you work out? Is it like a surgery? Is it something legit where you can't work out? I would stay active. Again, keep the protein pretty high. Make sure your sleep is on point. Don't go in a super big deficit though, because that will definitely cause you to lose muscle, more muscle than you probably otherwise will in 2 to 3 months. You can probably still do bodyweight exercises if it's like, oh, my gym closed. Well, you can still do a lot to maintain and preserve your muscle. So it's sort of hard to say if I don't know why you can't work out. It could be just an excuse. It could be something very legit. I just don't know. All right, next, what are the muscles that recover the fastest and what are the muscles that recover the slowest? So some people just go based on muscle size. So they think, oh, the quads are huge, therefore they take longer to recover. Like if you give yourself a scratch, the longer the scratch, the more time it takes to recover. It's just the more tissue damage, etc. It's not that black and white. And I think that's a very overly simplistic way of thinking. Every muscle is going to be different. And some big muscles recover fairly quickly, and some smaller muscles take longer. There might be a small correlation, but it's not, a slam dunk by any means. Also, it's going to be fairly individual. Some people find that various muscles just take longer or less long to recover than other people. I would say, generally speaking, just going from head to toe, calves are pretty quick. Quads, faster than you think. They're so huge, but faster than you would think based on just their size. Hamstrings take a while. They're just more exposed to mechanical stress and damage, especially on something like a Romanian deadlift that gives a big stretch and causes a lot of damage. Glutes, faster than you would think. They're massive in some cases, but they recover a lot more quickly than you might think. Erectors can take some time, especially if it's done with deadlifts. Lats, fairly fast. Traps, also pretty fast. Shoulders, fairly fast. Chest takes a little bit of time in some cases, just because often it's easy to get, a big stretch on the pecs, which takes time to actually recover from. Biceps, longer than you would think, given their relatively, small cross-sectional area. Triceps, somewhat fast. Forearms, very fast. I think I got everything there. Oh, abdominals, if you give a shit, are also pretty fast as well. You can train them multiple times per week, if not every single day. Just based on my experiences and based on my observations, it's going to be somewhat individual. It also depends on the exercise that you do. A hamstring curl is going to be easier to recover from than an RDL. So it just depends on what you're doing, how much volume, of course, how close you're going to failure. All of these factors change the recovery time. Next one, lean sources of veg protein and how much soya can you fit in your diet as a male without experiencing harmful estrogen levels. So this is one thing that I've sort of changed my mind about over the past 2 to 4 years, somewhere around there. I don't think it's much of a concern, especially if it's something like tofu that is fermented. I think the estrogen thing is very much overblown, and it's not that big of a deal. Now, in terms of lean sources of vegetable protein, there are plenty of good sources of vegetable protein, but lean sources is a little bit tricky. You have a lot of lean animal-based sources of protein, but a lot of vegetable sources, they have tag-along fats and tag-along carbs. And therefore, especially if you're cutting and you want to have high protein with somewhat lower carbs and somewhat lower fats to keep your calories low, so you're actually losing fat, it's going to be a little bit trickier. If you want 40% of your calories from protein, which might be a good idea if you're cutting, that's going to be an uphill battle. Stuff like tofu, tempeh, nuts, seeds, these are beans, etc. It's going to be tough because a lot of those have a lot of carbs and or a lot of fats. And so there's just, you might have to supplement as a vegetarian to hit your protein numbers. Not saying it's 100% needed, but it's going to be much more helpful than someone who eats meat. Next question, how can you tell if you're progressing if adding weight to one lift causes your other lift to suffer? For example, adding 2.5 kilos to your bent over row causes your pull-ups later in the session to drop by a few reps. I wouldn't worry too much about it as long as you're progressing in the first lift. Put what you care about early in the workout. The rest, just do your best, but if you don't progress, it's not that big a deal. However, over time, you should be progressing at everything, even if it's later in the workout. In the short term, if you get better at the first thing, you might get slightly worse at the second thing. Slightly worse. It shouldn't tank, it should get slightly worse, if at all. Long term, however, everything should be going up. If it's not, something is probably wrong. All right, next one, how much rest time do we actually need, and are deloads necessary? So the first part, it depends. Usually I recommend 2 to 3 minutes, but if you feel fine after a minute and a half, go for a minute and a half. If you feel like you need 4 minutes or 5 minutes or 6 minutes, that's how much time you might actually need. However, it needs to be instinctive. Don't just take 4 minutes because it's 4 minutes. This is one thing where I never write rest times in training programs because it has to be done instinctively, and everyone is going to be a little bit different, and it's going to be even different from workout to workout. And it's not something where there's like, hey, here's a formula, because it is quite different. It depends on how much you're lifting, your overall cardiovascular capacity, a whole bunch of factors. Second part, are deloads necessary? In theory, yes. In practice, maybe not as much. I think I formally deloaded like twice in my life. And I hated it. It was horrible. It just felt really, really bad. I didn't like it. I didn't enjoy it. And usually life will throw you a deload or the occasional workout that you miss, or, you aren't training as hard for whatever reason. And, I think it's only really necessary if you're extremely serious about it, and it's more important for strength training. This idea that you have to set up your mesocycle in a certain way. It has to be, week 1, 3 reps away from failure, then 2, then 1, then 0, then deload. I think that's an overly simplistic and often unrealistic way of going about things. Life is not that predictable, and often you'll just get deloads thrown at you when you don't expect it, and just use those to keep progressing. You can still make very good progress as a beginner, as an intermediate, and even as advanced without ever deloading. So in theory, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and it's hard to argue against it, but in practice, it doesn't always make sense. Next one, what effects does donating blood have on muscle growth? Parentheses, natty. I don't know. I usually don't research for these Q&As at all. All of it is just off the dome. I'm not sure. I would expect that you're going to feel a little bit more tired. You're going to need more sleep. You're going to feel lethargic. You might get craving for different foods in order to replace what was taken away from you. And so, don't go super hard on the same day you gave blood. I've given blood and then, hey, I'm going to go run 10 miles. Doesn't work out that well. And so you have to keep in mind, you're not going to be at 100%, at least for a few days. But apart from that, I don't see how it would have a huge long-term effect. Next one, sort of an unusual question. How do you know if your body is just not feeling it or you're just lazy? Well, you have to realize all sensations are just in your brain. Okay, so how your body feels is basically an interpretation formulated by your brain. So if you're not feeling it, or if your body is lazy, or if your brain is lazy, like those are all sort of the same thing. Now, how to know if you should take an easy day? Are you just being lazy, or does your body actually need recovery? That is trickier. I would say know yourself. So when I work with clients, some clients, they'll be like, I'm really tired today, and I know they're really tired, like they're just beaten up. Other clients, they'll be like, I'm really tired, and I'll be like, I don't know. Like, everyone's mentality is a little bit different, and you have to realize, are you the person who over exaggerates those feelings of tiredness and lethargy, etc., or are you the kind of person who will unnecessarily push through those feelings when you should hold back? Once you can push yourself really hard, that's when, in some cases, it might actually behoove you to hold back. But for most people, they don't need to train easier. They have to train harder if they actually want to see results. Next question, are you planning a rewrite of your book Sweat? Oh, I like this question. With the things you've learned since then, / are there any things in your book Sweat that you would change now since learning new information? So I'm always learning. I'm still, reading research, reading scientific papers, watching YouTube videos, keeping up to date with everything. I think that's very, very important. But at the same time, I wrote my book after I'd already been learning very intensively for 5 years. So I see some people get into social media very, very quickly. So they're 18 or 19 years old, they've been training a few years, and they already have hundreds of thousands of followers, and they're already putting out a lot of often misinformation because they just don't know any better. They haven't really picked through the information. They haven't even really, trained themselves for very long, and now they're a coach or they're selling ebooks. Like, So when I look back at my old Quora answers or my old YouTube videos or my old book, there's not a lot that I would change because my understanding was already fairly solidified. And I already, I was fortunate enough to discover a lot of really, really good sources very early in my lifting journey. And so, yeah, there's not really a lot that I would change. It would all be fairly minor stuff. And I stand by everything in that book. Same thing with my older YouTube videos. Sure, some of the stuff is a little bit, very rough around the edges, and the delivery was not very good, but the information is still very solid. Next question, what are your thoughts on lowering frequency of body part training while on a cut to aid recovery? For example, switching from a PPL split to a bro split as one nears 10% body fat. I don't like that. I don't think that's a great idea. I think you can modify other variables if you're having trouble recovering, which might happen as you get leaner, but you shouldn't cut frequency of all things. I would say if you do better on frequency when you are bulked up, you're going to do better on frequency when you are dieted down. So I would change, perhaps how close to failure you go on some sets and maybe your overall volume. But other than that, I wouldn't change a lot. And certainly frequency shouldn't be something that changes. If anything, you might want frequency to go up slightly if you're having trouble recovering. So you're doing less volume per session and you're spreading that volume, just across more sessions. Next one, do you track or consider micronutrients in your diet? I do not track them. I don't even track macronutrients or calories, which a lot of people are pretty shocked about. Do I consider them? I try to eat mostly whole, natural foods, but it's not, I'm not putting things into MyFitnessPal and like, oh, this one has this much bronium, this much, get it, bronium, because we're bros. Anyway, this much calcium, like, oh, fuck, I didn't hit my daily magnesium total. I don't really delve into the minutia that much. And even when I did count calories and macronutrients, micronutrients was not something that I tracked. And I think unless you have a specific deficiency, it's probably not worth doing. All right, last one. Hey coach, how to strengthen the non-dominant side of the body? In my case, my left arm is weaker than my right arm. Any tips to make them more balanced in strength? Thanks. No problem. So the typical advice is to do more reps with the weak side. In practice, I haven't seen any information, any actual data, scientific research that says this is effective. Yes, you can, only work one side of the body and see growth, but, I'm not sure if this is going to be the best strategy. You can do one arm or one leg exercises, but I'm not sure how much this is going to do. It can identify a weakness, but can it correct a weakness? I'm not entirely sold. It also depends on how bad it actually is. Is one arm like 20% stronger than the other? That's a potential issue. If it's 5%, I would say that's just completely fine. Everyone is going to have slight imbalances, and this is probably not something to worry about too much. It could be sometimes related to nerves. If someone has nerve damage, that can dramatically impact muscle size as well as strength. So that might be looking into, like if you get a pinched nerve in your shoulder, that can impact one side of your strength in terms of like curls or extensions or something like that pretty dramatically. So I would say it could be, a nerve issue. It could also just be a structural issue. If you have, a structural imbalance, that can impact your strength. Could be a stabilizer issue. If you have a rotator cuff issue on one side, this can impact your strength in neighboring areas. So I would say assess how big the discrepancy is and then try to do some extra reps on that weak side. And then also just focusing on lifting equally, lifting evenly. If you're twisting to one side, well, don't do that. There, simple. Call the set when your technique starts to break down. Even if you can do more reps and you're twisting, well, don't do those extra reps because those are going to be more on the stronger side, and it's just going to keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and your weaker side is going to keep just staying weak. All right, that is all for this video, the top 20 questions. If I didn't get your question, I'm sorry. Maybe save it for next time. I don't know. I feel bad because I used to answer every single damn question, and now it's just the channel is growing and it's literally impossible to answer. Like, what am I going to have, a 4 or 5 hour Q&A? Just not really possible. Anyway, thank you so much for the support. Like, share, subscribe, slap around that notification button, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.